7 years ago, the entire gaming world witnessed one of the craziest moments in esports history, the Fortnite World Cup. 100 of the best Fortnite players on Earth traveled to New York City with one dream: become world champion and win millions of dollars. The tournament had a mind-blowing $30 million prize pool, making it one of the biggest esports events ever created. Overnight, unknown teenagers became millionaires, small streamers became celebrities, and Fortnite officially became more than just a game. It became a global phenomenon. But while everyone remembers Kyle Giersdorf lifting the trophy and taking home $3 million, almost nobody talks about the other players who finished in the top 10. Some became massive stars, some quietly disappeared, and some completely vanished from the internet like they never existed. So today, we're looking at what really happened to the top 10 Fortnite World Cup winners. And trust me, some of these stories are insane. Number 10. Fatch, the worst player, who shocked the world. Back in 2019, almost nobody expected Fatch to perform well at the Fortnite World Cup. In fact, many people believed he was one of the weakest players in the entire finals lobby. Compared to the huge names competing in New York, Fatch was almost completely overlooked. But then the games started, and somehow, the 15-year-old underdog shocked everybody watching. Against some of the best players in Fortnite history, Fatch managed to finish 10th in the world, earning an unbelievable $225,000. For a teenager, that amount of money was life-changing. Most people expected that performance to launch him into superstardom. Normally, a top 10 World Cup finish would instantly create a huge streaming career, sponsorship deals, and thousands of loyal fans. But strangely, that never really happened for Fatch. Just days after the World Cup, he streamed on Twitch and barely reached around 70 viewers. Instead of taking advantage of the momentum, he became incredibly inactive online. He rarely streamed, rarely uploaded content, and fans slowly became confused about where he went. Competitive Fortnite also became much harder for him after 2019. His earnings dropped massively in 2020, making only a tiny fraction of what he earned during the World Cup year. But unlike many players who completely quit, Fatch kept grinding quietly behind the scenes. Over the next few years, he slowly rebuilt himself competitively and continued earning decent money from Fortnite tournaments. However, by 2024, burnout finally caught up to him. Fatch officially announced his retirement from competitive Fortnite, saying the game simply wasn't enjoyable anymore. And honestly, his story perfectly shows how difficult it is to stay motivated after reaching the absolute top at such a young age. Number 9. Riversan, the prodigy who completely vanished. At just 17 years old, Riversan walked away from the Fortnite World Cup with $300,000 after placing 9th in the world. Unlike some players who peaked during the World Cup and immediately fell off, Riversan actually continued performing at an incredibly high level afterward. Throughout 2019 and 2020, he remained one of the strongest competitive Fortnite players in North America, consistently placing well in tournaments and building a strong reputation in the scene. Then came one of the biggest moments of his career. In 2021, Riversan won the FNCS All-Star Showdown, proving he was still among the elite players in Fortnite. At that point, many fans believed he had years of success ahead of him. But behind the scenes, things were clearly changing. By 2022, Riversan started playing Valorant more often on stream and seemed less interested in Fortnite. Then, in March 2023, he officially announced his retirement from competitive Fortnite. What happened next became one of the weirdest stories from the entire World Cup top 10. After retiring, Riversan's Twitch numbers completely collapsed. Streams that once attracted thousands of viewers suddenly struggled to reach even a handful of people. Then, in early 2024, he seemingly disappeared from the internet entirely. His social media accounts were deleted. Streams stopped, posts stopped, updates stopped. For a player who was once considered one of Fortnite's brightest stars, the silence was honestly shocking. To this day, many fans still wonder what truly happened to Riversan. Number 8. Nayte, the Fortnite star, who slowly faded away. After finishing 8th at the World Cup and earning $375,000, Nayte quickly became one of Fortnite's biggest personalities. Unlike some competitive players who struggled to entertain viewers, Nayte had the perfect mix of skill and personality to build a huge audience online. His Twitch channel exploded in popularity after the World Cup, eventually reaching nearly 20,000 live viewers during Fortnite's peak years. At the same time, he continued earning strong money competitively throughout 2020 and 2021. Everything about Nayte's career made it seem like he would become one of the long-term faces of Fortnite content creation. But slowly, cracks started appearing. By 2022, his competitive earnings had dropped heavily, and he began streaming Valorant more often than Fortnite. Fans started noticing that he was becoming less consistent online. Then came the inactivity. Throughout 2023, Nayte barely streamed, despite still having a massive audience that supported him. By 2024, he had almost completely disappeared from Twitch altogether. He briefly returned in late 2025 for a few Valorant streams, but outside of those rare appearances, his online presence became incredibly quiet. Unlike other Fortnite pros who announced dramatic retirement, retirements, Nayte simply faded away slowly over time, almost like the Fortnite era itself, quietly disappearing in front of everyone. Number 7. Skite, the only player to reach top 10 in both events. When people talk about the greatest Fortnite World Cup performances ever, Skite deserves way more respect than he gets. Not only did he finish 7th in the solo competition and earn $525,000, but he also achieved something nobody else managed to do: place top 10 in both solos and duos at the World Cup. That meant Skite was statistically one of the most consistent players at the entire tournament. By the end of 2019, Skite had earned over $700,000 total and looked destined to become one of Europe's biggest Fortnite stars. But like many players on this list, Fortnite's constantly changing competitive scene slowly wore him down. Earnings dropped in 2020. They dropped even further in 2021. And eventually, by 2022, Skite had mostly stepped away from professional Fortnite competition. For a while, he explored other games like Valorant, just like many former Fortnite pros. But unlike others who disappeared forever, Skite eventually found a way to reinvent himself. He returned to streaming Fortnite, stayed involved in the community, and eventually became head coach of Team Vitality's Fortnite division. While many former World Cup stars vanished completely, Skite managed to stay connected to Fortnite and esports in an entirely different way. Number 6. Crue, the forgotten Viking. One of the most forgotten players from the Fortnite World Cup top 10 is Crue, who finished 6th and earned $600,000 representing Valhalla Vikings. At the time, Crue looked like one of Europe's rising competitive stars. His performance at the World Cup proved he could compete against the absolute best players in the world, and many expected him to remain a top-tier pro for years. But after the hype of the World Cup faded, Crue's career slowly became quieter and quieter. Unlike players such as Bugha or King, he never built a massive streaming audience or huge social media presence. He continued competing for a while, but over time, his visibility within the Fortnite scene started disappearing. As newer players entered the competitive scene and Fortnite's meta constantly evolved, Crue slowly became one of those players fans simply stopped hearing about. And honestly, that's one of the saddest realities about esports. Even players who once stood among the best in the entire world can slowly become forgotten as the game moves on. Today, many casual Fortnite fans barely even remember Crue's World Cup run, despite how incredible it truly was. Number 5. King, the 13-year-old superstar. If there's one player besides Bugha who truly became a Fortnite icon after the World Cup, it's Thiago Lapp. At only 13 years old, King completely shocked viewers with his insanely aggressive playstyle and fearless confidence. Every time he pushed another player during the World Cup, the crowd went crazy. By the end of the tournament, he had finished 5th in the world and earned $900,000. Almost overnight, King became one of the most popular Fortnite players on Earth. The day after the tournament, he streamed to over 13,000 live viewers. Fans loved his personality, his confidence, and the fact that he played with absolutely zero fear. Unlike many pros who struggled to transition into content creation, King mastered both competitive Fortnite and entertainment at the same time. Year after year, he continued growing his audience while still competing at a high level. Even as many World Cup players retired or disappeared, King remained one of the biggest Fortnite personalities online. Millions of followers, massive YouTube views, huge Twitch streams. He successfully turned one incredible tournament into a long-term empire. And considering he's still incredibly young today, his success story might honestly be one of the most impressive in Fortnite history. Number 4. Kreo from $1 Million Pro to crypto streams. Few players from the Fortnite World Cup have had a stranger career arc than Nayte. After finishing 4th and earning over $1 million, Kreo looked set to become one of Fortnite's future superstars. But controversy already surrounded him before the World Cup due to accusations involving another player and alleged scams. Despite the drama, his incredible World Cup performance temporarily rebuilt his image in the community. For a while, things seemed stable. Kreo continued competing throughout 2020 while also growing his Twitch channel. But slowly, his Fortnite career started collapsing. Tournament results became weaker, viewership declined, and eventually, Fortnite stopped being the center of his content entirely. Then, things got even stranger. By 2024 and 2025, Kreo had transitioned heavily into crypto-related streams and meme coin content. Fans who once watched him dominate Fortnite tournaments were shocked seeing him discuss crypto instead of gaming. Many comments on his social media mocked his transformation, constantly referencing old Fortnite memes and famous moments from the World Cup era. It's honestly one of the most bizarre downfalls in Fortnite history. One moment, he was competing for millions on the biggest esports stage in the world, and years later, he was known more for crypto streams than Fortnite itself. Number 3. EpikWhale, the most consistent Fortnite pro ever. While many Fortnite World Cup players eventually burned out or quit gaming, Shane Cotton somehow stayed elite year after year. After finishing 3rd at the World Cup and earning $1.2 million at only 16 years old, EpikWhale continued dominating competitive Fortnite Fortnite longer than almost anyone else from the tournament. What makes his story so impressive is the consistency. Fortnite changes constantly. New metas appear every season, mechanics evolve, entire playstyles become outdated overnight. Yet despite all of that, EpikWhale kept adapting and remained one of the best players in the world. While other former stars disappeared, he continued earning serious money from tournaments every single year. Unlike many players on this list, he never had a dramatic retirement or sudden disappearance. He simply stayed committed to Fortnite and kept competing at the highest level. Even if he never became as mainstream as Bugha, his competitive longevity might honestly make him one of the greatest Fortnite players ever. Number 2. Psalm, the veteran who walked away. Before Fortnite even existed, Harrison Chang was already an experienced esports veteran, competing professionally in Heroes of the Storm. So when he finished second at the Fortnite World Cup and earned $1.8 million, many people believed this was just the beginning of an even bigger Fortnite career. Instead, it ended shockingly fast. Only 8 months after the World Cup, Psalm retired from competitive Fortnite. Unlike younger players who built their entire careers around Fortnite, Psalm had already experienced years of professional gaming before the Battle Royale boom. After leaving Fortnite, he explored several different games, including Valorant, Apex Legends, Deadlock, and League of Legends. Over time, his streaming became increasingly inconsistent. He would disappear for months before randomly returning to stream another game. Eventually, even those appearances became rare. Today, Psalm seems to live a much quieter life compared to many other World Cup players. And honestly, after spending over a decade grinding esports at the highest level, maybe stepping away from the spotlight was exactly what he wanted. Number 1. Bugha, the kid who became Fortnite's greatest legend. And finally, the player everyone remembers, Kyle Giersdorf. At only 16 years old, Bugha completely dominated the Fortnite World Cup and won $3 million, one of the largest prizes ever awarded in esports at the time. But what happened afterward was even crazier. Almost overnight, Bugha became the face of Fortnite itself. Mainstream media interviews, millions of followers, sponsorships, TV appearances. Suddenly, a teenager who had once streamed to only a few hundred people was now one of the biggest names in gaming worldwide. His Twitch audience exploded into the tens of thousands almost instantly after the World Cup. And unlike many other Fortnite pros, Bugha actually managed to stay on top for years. He continued dominating competitively, kept earning huge prize money, and remained one of the biggest Fortnite streamers in the world long after the original World Cup hype faded away. Even today, despite streaming less often and branching into different types of content, Bugha is still respected as one of the greatest Fortnite players ever. With millions in earnings, millions of followers, and years of dominance, Bugha didn't just win the Fortnite World Cup. He became the symbol of an entire era of gaming. The Fortnite World Cup changed lives forever. Some players became legends, some disappeared completely, and some are still trying to figure out life after becoming teenage millionaires. But one thing is certain, the 2019 Fortnite World Cup will always remain one of the greatest moments in gaming history. And honestly, we may never see anything like it ever again. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more Fortnite documentaries, esports stories, and gaming deep dives. And comment below which Fortnite World Cup player shocked you the most.